Stanley Sfikas, professor of classical philosophy at the University of Indianapolis, Athens campus, accepted my proposal to search in the Athens National Library for evidence concerning the correlation between the positions of contemporary astrophysicists and of the ancient Greek philosophers regarding the beginning of the world. Professor Sfikas has published a doctoral dissertation on Aristotelian metaphysics, and his views have always been especially valuable to me. After a detailed investigation that we conducted in ancient texts concerning ancient cosmology, we reached common conclusions, a fact that made me particularly happy. The important point about the question concerning the beginning of the world and its functioning that Professor Sfikas emphasized in his discussions with me is whether the question itself is of exoteric or esoteric significance. I took this to mean that if we were to formulate a theory about the beginning of the world, based solely on cold numbers and equations, then we would create a theory grounded in the nature of numbers, but not in the functioning of the principle itself. In order to discuss the hypothesis of a cosmic beginning, one is compelled from a logical point of view to raise the question, what existed before the beginning?
If we assume that prior to the beginning of the world there were only laws, we come to the legitimate question, how in an infinite past a certain God instituted a cluster of infinite laws without any possibility of their manifestation, trapped, as it were, in complete inertia.
However, because law has as its main feature the expression of motion in any type of matter whatever, the notion of the inertia of laws contradicts common sense.
Aristotle holds that matter is not generated, nor is form. Both are eternal. That which is generated is neither new matter nor new form. Becoming is a transition from a possibility to a reality, from potentiality to actuality. This is precisely what the all-powerful motion that transforms potentiality into actuality validates. This motion is identical with cause and effect, which define the constitution and the essence of the matter in the world.
From this it follows that for the universe, there never was a beginning.
Zeno claims that there is no matter without spirit, or spirit without matter. Matter is the passive element of nature, which is in constant transformation, while spirit, which is considered an inseparable part of matter, is the active element.
Every real entity has a physical constitution. The action of spirit upon matter manifests itself as what he calls seminal reason.
And then you have Anaxagoras, who said that there are seeds, infinite number of seeds, and everything is in everything else, and there is mind. The first to speak about mind. Mind are the laws, of course, that govern the universe.
For Zeno, the first principle of the world is spirit, that which defines and safeguards the lawful order of nature. Assuming that there was a big bang from a hydrogen molecule, that molecule would have to carry within it the seminal reason, meaning the breath of life, which expresses itself in an automatic interior activity. If this did not occur, then the universe is only mechanistic. If, however, it is only mechanistic, without the privilege of automatic motion, then its machine must be condemned to eternal inertia. But the dominant feature of the universe is motion. Thus, the universe as a whole, in this view, must be composed of matter and spirit, indissolubly bound. Returning alone to my home that rainy night, I was thinking that the most serious question in our lives is, why does the universe exist? I posed myself questions and tried to answer them. Is the universe perfect? If it is not perfect, then why is it amenable to equations? And why do the laws which define its existence and its essence not collapse? If it is perfect, is it eternal? If it is eternal, can it have a beginning? If it does not have a beginning, does it have a divine source? if we assume that it evolves with an outward tendency, ought it not to have an automatic tendency to flow inwardly for it to construct its perfection? If the universe functions mechanically, can it also be animate? Does it have a divine origin? Does it have a divine destination? If not, why not? As I turned the key in the door, I recalled the scientific view pertaining to the weak anthropic cosmological principle, which claims that approximately 10 billion years were needed for intelligent life to develop on our planet. In short, sentience, thought and human intelligence, according to this theory, must have begun from a zero basis with a tendency towards an infinitely evolutionary state of affairs. Conversely, the more one examines the past, the more man is seen as less intelligent, according to the same theory. If this is the case, I said to myself, the entirety of Greek philosophy must be abolished, as it concerns the autonomous existence of complete knowledge. And this, because I have always believed that science is the servant of wisdom, and never the converse. And that the key to every scientific demonstration is the experiment produced by the mind for the solution of each problem. I was happy as I closed the door of my house. I was certain that at the apex of the pyramid of becoming, there was spirit, only spirit. Spirit which is eternal, unborn and immortal. Intellect is an eternal creation of eternal man in an eternal world.
The three big questions of philosophy, as we know, is what is really real, what is knowledge, can we have certainty of knowledge, can we have truth, and of course, what is the good, what is the agathon? These basic questions that correspond to metaphysics, to epistemology, and to ethics, the three major parts of philosophy.
I always enjoyed accompanying Carolina to the popular market of Athens. I found it fascinating to watch the people, young and old, men, women and children, browsing, choosing, shopping. A strange twist of fate led us to a truly philosophical fishmonger. The owner of the fish tried to persuade me that the fish is at this moment in front of me, and that if I don't take it at once, it won't be there in front of me any longer, because someone else will have taken it. The fish you see before you, said the philosophical fishmonger, will no longer exist in 2 hours. It will be as if you never passed by here, so you are losing the opportunity to acquire it. Are you saying I will never find any fish again, because the ocean will run dry? I asked the fisherman, grinning. The ocean works for you and for everyone, answered the fisherman philosopher. The ocean does not run dry. It is infinite. Do you know why it is infinite? It's infinite for one reason, because it was never born, and it will never die. I know what I'm talking about. I believe you know a lot, Carolina told him. Have you ever seen the sun rise from the sea while you are in a boat fishing? The fisherman continued. No, I answered. If you are lucky enough to see it, then you will understand what God has granted us, and we don't know how to value it. In the end, I purchased the fish, not because it impressed me as food, but because I liked the man who sold it to me, and who spoke of eternal values. This is a fish. It might not also not be one for me if I had not bought it, and certainly, if I had not come to the market, I would never have learned that the fish is, in other words, exists. This fish came out of an ocean which continually produces fish. And this ocean is infinite in a conventional sense, since for millions of years, humans have been eating fish from it, without the fish ever disappearing. I was thinking that Aristotle believed that being refers to whatever man can apprehend in the entire universe with his 5 senses, and that being is characterized as a subject by matter as well as by form. So the fish exists for me because I perceive it. In the world, matter cannot exist without form, nor form without matter. These two things have an indissoluble unity between them.
Parmenides, who said that change is an illusion, permanence is reality.
For Aristotle, both matter and form are eternal. Generation, that is to say becoming, is always in a state of reproduction in which matter generates matter and form generates form. A transition from possibility to reality suggests motion. The motion that is the being of the world is self-existent and eternally dynamic.
The harmony of the natural world is based on four great forces. Hawking himself informs us about these forces.
In the early 60s, the forces that were known to physics were classified into four categories that seemed to be separate and independent of each other. The first of the four categories was the gravitational force, which is carried by a particle of spin 2, called the graviton. Gravity is by far the weakest of the four forces. However, it makes up for its low strength by having two important properties. The first is that it is universal. That is, it affects every particle in the universe in the same way. All bodies are attracted to each other. None are unaffected or repelled by gravity. The second important property of the gravitational force is that it can operate over long distances. Together, these two properties mean that the gravitational forces between the particles in a large body all add up and can dominate over all other forces. Gravity will cause a sufficiently large body to collapse in on itself, and nothing can stop it. In the case of an isolated body, like a star or a galaxy, the collapse will produce a black hole. The second of the four categories into which the forces were divided is the electromagnetic force, which is carried by a particle of spin 1, called the photon. Electromagnetism is a million billion times more powerful than the gravitational force, and like gravity, it can act over great distances. However, unlike gravity, it does not act on all particles in the same way. Some particles are attracted, some are unaffected, and some are repelled. The attractions and repulsions between the particles in two large bodies will cancel each out almost exactly, unlike the gravitational forces between the particles, which will all be attractive. That is why one falls towards the Earth, and not towards a television set. On the other hand, on the scale of molecules and atoms, with only a relatively small number of particles, electromagnetic forces dominate gravitational forces utterly. On the even smaller scale of the nucleus of an atom, a trillionth of a centimeter, the third and fourth categories, the weak and strong nuclear forces, dominate other forces.
The four great forces, of which Professor Hawking spoke, determine the measure of function of universal harmony. Both the quality and the quantity of each force yield a total result exactly such as the universe needs in order to exist. If just one of these four forces was a little weaker, or a little stronger than it is, then these four forces could not coexist in a harmonious whole. And, to be sure, with that loss of measure, the universe would be destroyed. That measure of complete harmony has a divine source.
Θα ξεκινήσω απευθείας από εσάς, κύριε Παπά.
In my television program, Apocryphal Harmony, in a broadcast dedicated to the whole of the cosmos, I discussed with my guests whether it was possible for man to comprehend the totality of the world that we are able to perceive outside us, beyond the Earth, beyond the planetary and galactic system. That entire known universe, which we detect at night with telescopes, constitutes a substantiated part of a whole that is perceptually unsubstantiated, since it is impossible for us to comprehend that whole. Whatever man knows, and whatever he will know in the future about the universe, will always be scant, given conventional human development. Whatever we cannot see, whatever we cannot measure, we must consider as non-existent, in the sense that it is non-being as to our apprehension of it. And whatever is non-being does not move, since it does not exist in our minds. Motion is a property whose limits are within human calculation. Whatever we perceive as existent, we can say with certainty about it that it moves and is real. The water that flows from the cliff and fills the lake is a reality. But the systems of the galaxies, beyond the borders of human perception and measurement, are not real. Hence, they do not have movement, since we only suppose that they probably are found in distant worlds.
The whole of the universe is not calculable with precision, nor measurable, nor demonstrable. It is beyond reason, for it has unknown limits. And finally, it is beyond all human computation or speculation.
Therefore, the whole is immobile and conceptually belongs to the realms of ideas concerning God. Every scientific theory that tries to prove that the existing knowledge of the part constitutes the scale of interpretation of the whole brings to my mind the fisherman who desperately tries to illuminate the ocean with a lamp on his boat. The whole, even as a word, is conventional. Nothing bars us from saying that the whole can reproduce itself in a framework of infinite arithmetical mirror images of wholes. Have you ever entered an elevator that has mirrors all around? If not, imagine yourself as a conventional whole. Go into an elevator with mirrors and count, or try to count, how many times you see yourself all round. Many times? Very many? Or an infinite number? Our attempt to understand the universe in its wholeness indicates that our minds try to create a unified theory in which the totality of laws of the universe will be known, even if only conventionally, and we will be able to interpret it. Hawking himself discusses the theory of everything.
On April the 29th, 1980, I gave my inaugural lecture as the Location Professor of Mathematics at Cambridge. My title was, Is the End in Sight for Theoretical Physics? I described the progress we had already made in the last 100 years in understanding the universe, and asked what the chances were that we would find a complete unified theory of everything by the end of the century. Well, the end of the century is almost here. Although we have come a long way, particularly in the last 3 years, it doesn't look as if we are going to quite make it. But this seems an appropriate time to review the progress we have made, and ask what the prospects are that we attain the goal of theoretical physics in the not-too-distant future. Or will it always be just over the horizon?
My faith in the total interpretation of the cosmos, as it is posited by the ancient Greek philosophers, leads me to the conclusion that science, in its effort to interpret the totality of the universe, will always find itself beyond the horizon, as Professor Hawking calls it. For reality is found in the esoteric interpretation of laws, numbers, and equations. It is the reality of insight, wisdom, intuition that acts beyond scientific knowledge. It is the horizon of the soul of the world that only the human soul, which is a part of it, can perceive. When we discussed the real and the unreal on Apocryphal Harmony, the telephone lines were literally jammed with viewers thirsting to be informed whether the world we live in is a reality or an illusion. The conclusions were many. If we take the position of Pythagoras, we will say that the unique reality in the world is number and mathematical relations. Xenophanes believed that the greatest reality is the beginning of the world from God. Parmenides proclaimed that the unitary principle of being was ungenerated, immobile, and incorruptible. Heraclitus held the doctrine of general flux. He believed that reality consisted in the unceasing transformation of things in the world. We do not have the right to say that a thing, for example this garden, is precisely what we see. But we do have the right to say that this garden is what it is now, at this moment. But in the next moment, it will have undergone all the consequences of the change that derives from the continuous flow of becoming. Thus, this garden is never the same.
Ο νεοπλατωνικός φιλόσοφος Πλωτίνος.
The Neoplatonic philosopher Plotinus believed that the visible universe is an imitation. The real universe is mental, that which represents being. Being is not found anywhere, cannot be defined, measured or comprehended, for it itself is everything, and all souls are enclosed within it. For this reason, the highest reality a human being can experience is consciousness of being.
I liked Plotinus's ideas, and I wrote down the Greek word for being, om. The letter omikron is the circle, the design representation of the all. The letter mi, as a mathematical term, defines the infinite, that which cannot be counted or conceived. Hence, om equals omikron plus ni. This idea filled me with enthusiasm. I considered that because in the Greek language each letter is also a number with a unique value, and each word is a sum of letters which interpret with arithmetical and semantic completeness what the word itself means, I concluded that the single word om can constitute for each person the point of departure to conceive of the one, the monad, the beginning of numbers within which the all, in infinite arithmetical sums, evolves and exists, producing the eternal life universe. The idea of God existed deeply rooted in me from my childhood years. The automatic clock of nature, which at every moment determined birth, life and death, I felt was turning its minute hand wherever I found myself, in whatever existed around me. God, the universe, our earth and I were four different things, which I had made it my purpose to unite in an essence of the one. Only then could I claim to have entered into the realm of wisdom and the uniqueness of the Creator.
God expresses himself through religious perception, the universe through scientific views, our earth through the study of nature, ourself through self-knowledge.
This flower in the soil, is it animate or inanimate? It must be animate, since as soon as I pour water on the soil, the flower will begin to drink, and not only drink, it will at the same time choose ingredients in the earth and in its roots, which it will begin to spread. It will suck out the ingredients, it will pass them through its internal arteries, and will transform them into blossoms and leaves. In short, this flower is a regular, complete mind. The soil, does it have a soul? That too has a soul. It collaborates with light, water, and wind for the sake of nature. Like a gigantic factory, it continuously transforms the elements which compose it, reconstitutes them with light and water, and, in a new quality and kind of nourishment, it feeds the trees, plants, flowers, man, everything. I looked with admiration at the dark green climbing ivy, which I had planted a few months ago. It climbed high up the trunk of the tree, like a mountaineer. I noticed the small hairy feet, which had spread to its left and its right, and which stuck like a spike on the surface of the rock, so as to base its long body securely. What marvelous mind was functioning in that plant, which speechlessly, mutely had adopted the incline of the tree, observing the physical laws, the mathematical equations and the geometric designs which it had inherited from the University of Nature. I looked with awe around me, the trees, the plants, the lake, the water which gurgled as it flowed. I heard the cries of the birds which flew from branch to branch. I let the murmur of the wind, which passed through the foliage, flow to the depths of my soul. And suddenly, it seemed to me that this whole marvelous world, which was covered by the dome of the sky, was a boundless temple, and within that temple, the liturgy of nature, the eternal becoming, in mystical notes and voices, had been transformed into a heavenly psalm, a universal hymn, glorifying the Supreme One, the Divine Mind, the Great Overseer, who within that all lives, moves, and exists.